Current Events in the Blinded World, Part 5. You know, it is hard to believe that America has sunken to the level that it now stands at. It is hard to believe the insanity that is going on in this world and the conventional wisdom, so-called, that is being pumped out upon the masses of the blissfully ignorant and unaware. We've got the DOJ and the government pushing racial strife, using it as a weapon to take away our Second Amendment rights. They've already almost done away with our First Amendment rights. You can be arrested now for praying, as I've mentioned a number of times. You can be arrested now for saying anything against the president in his presence or at one of his rallies. If you're a rodeo clown and you wear a president's mask, then you are forced to apologize and you lose your job, and your boss even resigns over it. This is political correctness to the nth degree. This racial strife is being used again as an agenda. It's not being used for racial equality. And the blinded masses eat it up by the buckets full. I'm just going to kind of skip around with this commentary. A person could go absolutely crazy if they were trying to keep track of everything which is going on in this country. We're being attacked on all fronts. So I'm just going to kind of skip around some of the things I've seen in the past few months, past few weeks, which are just unbelievable. We've got Obamacare, which was passed over 2 years ago, which the vast majority of Americans, even some liberals and Democrats, do not want. Yet it's still being forced upon us. We have new rules now. Transgender bathrooms where transgender people can go to the bathroom that they feel most comfortable going to because of the sex they identify themselves with. We have taken Sodom and Gomorrah to a new level that was not possible in historical biblical times because of the new medical technology which allows people to change their sex. We have Al Gore pushing his old, tired, worn-out lie of climate change and saying that anyone who is against climate change theory is like a homophobe or a racist. You know, funny, I can recall Colonel Oliver North warning at that time Senator Al Gore in 1987 that Osama bin Laden was an imminent threat to America. And Mr. Gore acted like an intelligence phobic and ignored the warning. And from 1987 till 2001, when the Twin Towers came down, not one thing was done. The result was devastating. Let's jump to another story. A black teen shot a 5-month-old Caucasian baby in the head in front of his mother while he was robbing her. The baby, of course, died. And do you know that there was no national outcry for justice? No people chanting, no justice, no peace? And there was especially no outcry by the hypocrites who pushed so hard on behalf of the 17-year-old thug Trayvon Martin who attacked George Zimmerman and ended up dead. And speaking of that, in Florida, or maybe it wasn't Florida, maybe it was somewhere else. But regardless of where it was, 3 teenagers, 2 blacks and 1 white, killed an Australian man who was out jogging early in the morning. An Australian man who was an up-and-coming sports figure. And do you know what their excuse for killing him was? They were bored. So they went looking for someone to kill. Now, the trigger man was one of the 2 blacks. But do you know, no one is yelling racism or saying that the Australian man was stalked and killed? As a matter of fact, the sheriff in the county where this happened referred to them as children because they're 17 years old and one was 16. Referred to them as children. They're not children, they're little murdering bastards is what they are. They're not children. Nor was Trayvon a child like the media tried to portray him. 6'1" or 6'2" and about 170 pounds is not a child. Let's move on to another one. The president claims that the government may have to shut down if his new stimulus package and health care plans are not enacted on time. Yet they were the ones that pushed it back a year. But it doesn't stop him from sending billions of dollars to countries overseas that hate us or that are in turmoil, such as Egypt. Nor does it deter Mr. President from keeping Air Force One's jet engines hot as he travels all over the place on extended vacations or goes out campaigning for Obamacare, which again was passed over 2 years ago. Let's jump to another beautiful headline. The admitted terrorist of the Fort Hood shooting, Nadal Hassan, is being given a trial. Even when his opening statement was, "I am the shooter." In other words, I did this. And he elected to be his own lawyer and to cross-examine himself? Are we really this insane now? Apparently so. Since none of this makes sense, it can only mean one thing. Agenda at work. Not only have we been paying for this, let's see. The president doesn't want us using the word terrorist anymore, so what do you call a man who is a Muslim who attacks American soldiers on their own army base? Well, that's a workplace incident. Yeah, in the world of insane politically correctness, it's a workplace accident. However, the rest of us with common sense or a quarter of a brain know that it was a terrorist action, even admitted to by Nadal Hassan himself, who is still wearing the American uniform with the American flag shoulder patch on his shoulder. Another story. In Kansas, a school, a public school, which is prohibited from teaching religious things because of the separation of church and state, decided to celebrate the 5 pillars of the Islamic faith. All the while, Christian prayer is not allowed in that school. Neither is creation by God allowed to be taught. It is prohibited. In Michigan, Muslim students are allowed to kneel down and pray at school during school hours. Yet Christians are not allowed to even utter the name of God or Jesus Christ or to pray. In Texas, a YMCA branch kicked out a bunch of Christian teens for wearing pro-life t-shirts. The YMCA said they did not want a political debacle, so they kicked the students out. What happened to freedom of speech, as guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States of America? And the last time I checked, Kansas and Texas were still in the Union of the United States of America. And why aren't the so-called Christian reverends Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson worked up about all of this? Or the black on white attacks nationwide that have occurred since the Zimmerman verdict in the forms of killings and beatings? The answer? Well, it's pretty self-evident. They are racist, hypocritical liars which are pushing an agenda. Gay Boy Scouts. Oh, God help us. What is wrong with people? Can they really be this stupid and this blind? Apparently so. Do you know the government is offering a cash reward to Hitler Youth, American school students, high school students, to make a film promoting Obamacare. Again, a bill that was passed over 2 years ago. The reason for this is because Americans have overwhelmingly rejected Obamacare. But this is how you reach the youth of America who will be the voters of tomorrow. It's called propaganda. It's called brainwashing. So let's move on to another butte. The NSA, still spying on Americans. Oh yeah. Along with the IRS, still discriminating against Christian and conservative groups. The NSA still listening in to phone conversations, still reading your emails, still watching your blogs, still watching your channels, still watching your social media. What do you think the purpose of social media was? One of the biggest ones created by, what's his name? Zuckerberg? Gee, that sounds like a Jewish name. Wonder if there's a connection there. And then we get to those that are supposed to be on our side. the top so-called conservatives and Republicans. And do you know what they're doing? They're making grand speeches with words like, we should, or we should not, or we had better, or we had better not. We had better not allow this. We should do this. But still getting nothing done and getting nothing stopped as far as the runaway freight train of socialism working its way through America and tightening the noose around our necks daily. Another beauty. Community activist groups and telemarketers, and television ads are now informing illegals as well as Americans as to how they can sign up to get free food stamps and hundreds of entitlement programs. "47% of Americans now are on welfare or some kind of government entitled program, which is exactly what the plan was outlined many years ago. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch the documentary video on this channel in my favorites and documentaries called Agenda, the Documentary, The Grinding Down of America. Next thing, do you know that our border is still not secure? Gee, what a shock. I got news for you, it never will be secure. NAFTA saw to that. And now, the Border Patrol is putting up illegals in hotels and motels on the taxpayer's dime. You know, it's funny, I don't recall the job of immigration and enforcement, whether it be ICE or the Border Patrol or what have you, as being a travel agency for illegals to set them up in hotels and motels. Let's move on to another one. The Million Muslim March on Washington on 9/11 of this year, 2013. What a slap in the face to Americans. Americans who said, we will never forget. Apparently they forgot that they were never going to forget, or this kind of thing would not be tolerated. You know, every day there is some new insanity. And it goes beyond the scope of what any of us thought possible. You know, I thought 5 years ago, that I had seen insanity taken and stretched like elastic to its breaking point. But now I realize that it's gone far beyond that even. You know, we as Americans hold freedom as the most sacred of things. Yet we are so willing to be talked out of it with a good argument. In other words, a good sounding argument, or the right bribe, or if we are pandered to our satisfaction. Let's move on to another one. Did you see what happened out in Washington? Cops, police officers, handing out bags of Doritos to quell the munchies of a bunch of pot smokers who gather together every year for a thing called Hemp Fest. You know, sometimes I think the insane people who are locked up in institutions around America are better off than those of us who are walking around free. They seem to be more sane than what we call sane today by conventional wisdom. One thing has become overwhelmingly clear. A majority of mankind, specifically Americans, after years of being drunken on too many freedoms, no longer have the capacity to discern right from wrong anymore, or even to judge the sensible from the puerile, insane, ignorant, childlike stupidity that is being pushed on us. I know that God has set the spirit of slumber upon some, but this is ridiculous. What have we de-evolved into? Excuse me, what have we been brainwashed into believing? You know, I guess Paul said it best when he said, the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Apparently, the power behind the power is gaining more ground every day. The Kenite influence. Do you know that American flags are not even made in America anymore? Well, I shouldn't say that totally, because there are a few companies that still produce them. But I have gone and looked for myself and seen that little tag that says Made in China. Are you telling me that Americans cannot even make American flags anymore? Is this a sign of things to come? You bet it is. Let's talk about doctors for a minute. Doctors keeping patients coming back over and over and over again. Pill-pushing doctors keeping people addicted to drugs. Oh, your child has ADD or ADHD. Let's drug him to make him more calm and placid so he won't aggravate you. You know, in my day, there was a method of keeping a child from aggravating you which did not require drugs. It was called the belt or the paddle or the switch. But not anymore. Oh, for God's sakes, no. You're teaching children to be violent by example. You know, people are so stupid till they actually buy that. And these doctors keep patients coming back over and over again because they know that they will be paid by someone. Moreover, probably the 54% of working taxpayers. And doctors are also doing this to cover their own hind ends because of the fear of malpractice lawsuits, because frivolous lawsuits now have just skyrocketed because of the money that can be made by money-grubbing lawyers. You should know this. You see the ads on television every day. 1-800-BAD-DRUG. Or, you may have a claim. Time is running out. You must act quickly because you may be entitled to compensation. Compensated for what? People have been dying of diseases like cancer and all kinds of things since time immemorial. Now we have to be paid for it? The government has set aside billions for those who have suffered. Don't you just love those commercials? The only problem is that now all you have to do is say that you have suffered to get your free money. Only it isn't free. It is taxpayers' money being wastefully redistributed by the government in the socialist agenda, which is what socialism is about and always has been about. Removal of rights from Christians, redistribution of wealth, division between the races and classes. But people don't remember it. And very few of these things that I'm telling you made it to the television. Now you've got to go to some obscure internet website to see these truths. Unless you hear it on Fox News, and don't get me wrong, Fox News is slipping. They're leaning ever more and more to the left too, which they call the middle, but it's not the middle ground, it's the left. You know, Bill O'Reilly, I used to have so much respect for him, but now I have lost most of it. While he's still right in many things that he says, he also panders to the left. You cannot walk down the middle. It won't work. Especially when the middle has been removed from the center to the left side of the aisle. You know, I've had conversations with some of you who see these things just like I do. And I feel your pain. I know exactly what you're going through. You're going through the same thing I am. You're seeing the same thing that Daniel and Jeremiah and Isaiah and Ezekiel all saw, and some of the minor prophets. You're seeing our people go into captivity. Only now it's not the captivity of chain and whip. It's the captivity to big government. The captivity of socialism. The captivity of having our freedom of speech, our American rights guaranteed by the Constitution taken away from us. Our religion done away with and put on the back burner while other religions are respected in favor of multiculturalism. This nation is a multicultural nation. There's no denying that. But it is supposed to be an American nation. Not a hyphenated word American nation. In other words, there is no such thing as an African American. You're either an American or you're not an American. There is no such thing as a Latino American, a Hispanic American. Do you see Scottish Americans or Irish Americans or Italian Americans? Jewish Americans? Do you see a bunch of hyphenated words with regards to them? No, you don't. All you see is the word American. And then you've got these people pushing this whole idea that only whites are capable of racism. In other words, a black mob attacks white people, it's just everyday violence. A black man shoots a 5-month-old in the face, in the head, and kills him right in front of his mother. It's just everyday violence. Black on black crime, just everyday violence. And then the racists that are pushing this say, you white people always point to black on black crime because you don't want to admit that America is still racist. Yeah, it looks really racist. Let's see, we've got a Congressional Black Caucus. We've got a large proportion of people of color, of all colors, on welfare, paid for by Americans. We've got a black president. We've got Martin Luther King Day. Yeah, that sounds like a real racist nation to me. You know, these people that keep this myth of racism alive do so because without the myth, they become nobodies. They're no longer empowered to go and protest and push their agenda and make thousands of dollars at speeches and be people of notoriety who are constantly in the news. In short, they have sold their soul to the devil for the color of their skin and the notoriety it brings. I do not speak to those of you who are black, who are champions in this society, who have become doctors and lawyers and heads of business and have worked hard and have suffered at the hands of your own people by being called a pawn of the man or an Uncle Tom because you did become successful through hard work. You know, Dr. Ben Carson, Representative Allen West, are just two examples of the many good black people in America who go out and fight the good fight for faith, for country, for freedom, and for the rights that real civil rights leaders fought for so many years. The kind of equality where black people can go and become whatever they want to in this country because they have the freedom to do so, to attend college, to get an education. But what do they get from their own people? They're called sellouts, Uncle Toms, pawns to the man. Because it isn't popular to be successful in black. This is one reason why the Reverends Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton have to do what they do to stay popular, because they have no talents in any otherwise. And look at Jesse Jackson Jr. Hey, there's a model citizen for you. He and his wife only embezzled $650,000. And you know what they got for it? A slap on the wrist. You know, Bernie Madoff got exactly what he deserved. He's going to spend the rest of his life in jail for what he did. Yet Jesse Jackson Jr. didn't receive the same kind of punishment. I think, what did he get? 3 years? Wonder how many strings Daddy had to pull with the president and with the Congressional Black Caucus and with a whole bunch of other people to get that pulled through. And look at gay marriage now. Finally succeeded. You know why? Because they didn't give up. They didn't give up like you, Mr. and Mrs. America, Mr. and Mrs. Christian America. Again, you've got 1 million Muslims that are going to march on Washington. A few months back, myself and a few others here on YouTube and other Christian and conservative websites called for a 50 million Christian march on Washington. 50 million Christians. And we based that number because there were 224,880,000 and some 100 Christians in America. Over 125 denominations. So we thought that 50 million would be a small number. That represented about one person per church in America. We did not think this was too much to ask, but as you can see now by the video, we called it off due to lack of support. The video was getting very few. The websites were getting very few views. People were not sharing it. I guess they were afraid of the government. And if they're afraid of the government, then guess what? The government has too much power. This is what our forefathers knew and warned us against. But we do not listen to them any more than we listen to the holy word of God Almighty. And thusly, we're bringing the curses upon us that were promised in Deuteronomy chapter 28. And in many other places. You know, Israel of old turned their back on God and began worshiping things of the earth. Only what they worshipped were idols made with men's hands. Nowadays, the idols made with men's hands are Corvettes, Mustangs, Camaros, 16 by 9 1080p televisions, $3,000 worth of computers, and gaming groups. You want to see some real hilarious actions and activities? Go and look at the videos called Do Video Games Corrupt Us? Actually, they're not hilarious at all. They're sad. They're almost to the point of demonic in the language used and in the actions of some of the kids on there. One even foaming at the mouth, and another one throwing himself around as though he were possessed by a demon because his mother canceled his World of Warcraft account. Go and look at the videos. And while you're at it, do take note to look at the videos called The Well-Informed American Voters Not. Go and look at all the people who voted our president into office and what their reasoning was and how easily they were tricked by people asking them questions about the other candidates but putting Obama's name to the question. In other words, Mitt Romney's policies under the name of Obama. Well, guess what? They were all for Mitt Romney's policies if they thought they were Obama's policies. They revealed exactly what they are. And many of them even admitted it openly. The video showed that they voted for Obama simply because they wanted change. They wanted a black president. They voted for him because he was black. Not because of his policies, not because of anything that he could do. This is what we're dealing with here in America today, Christians. Going into captivity. Again, not the captivity of whip, chain, and bondage, but the captivity of socialistic idealism, which I have mentioned before. In the words of Karl Marx and Andreev Lenin, the father of the Soviet Union, the goal of socialism is communism. Communism means communal living. You know what communal living is? That's when you go out and work, and whatever you bring home, a portion of it is taken and given to someone else. Now, they call it socialism right now for a more palatable term than communism, but that is exactly what is happening in this country. And the next step will be what is already going on. Christians arrested, faith being removed. Apparently people are asleep to this, because if you look back to even, let's say 1960, look at all the things which have changed concerning faith in America. Are you this willing to give up the freedoms that we've lived with all these years, America? Are you? The freedom to go where you want when you want to? The freedom to have a barbecue and have friends and family over? The freedom to worship as you see fit? Even if you're a damned Satanist. Even the freedom to be an atheist if you want to. You know, there are true atheists in the world, and I know some who are good people. They would help you if you needed help. They'd give you the shirt off their back. They just can't believe in God. Most likely because they were brainwashed as a children or forced to go to church when they didn't want to and weren't ever taught anything. And this won't affect them as bad because secularism is the doctrine that's being pushed by this socialist agenda. But freedom of speech will be affected. You know, there are certain words that you can't say anymore in America. Not that I condone saying them, because I don't. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, what are they more than a word? So they're insulting. So they're demeaning. They're a word. A word that falls out of someone's mouth, usually someone ignorant to any sort of tact. But they're still nothing but words. Have you ever heard the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never harm me or hurt me? Not anymore. These words may be deplorable, but they're nothing more than words. And they're spoken freely among those who are of their kind. In other words, if you're black, you can say the N-word to each other, but don't let a white person call you an N-word, even though a black person can call a white person a cracker, a honky, or any of 100 other demeaning terms. The same is true of Latinos. Don't dare to call one of them some demeaning word. But they can call you whatever they want to. And not only that, they're going to come to this country and you're going to have to learn their language. They're not going to learn yours. And you're not going to get a job if you don't know their language. You know, I know good Americans that are out of work right now that cannot get a job because they are not bilingual or multilingual. This is the United States of America. The language is English. It always has been. Since the time that America was formed. Even the American Indian, which suffered at the hands of many Europeans of old, again at the behest of the powers that be, the power behind the power, learned our language. The Africans that were brought here as slaves and generations forward have learned the language. Many Hispanics who have come to this country from Cuba, from Mexico, from other countries have learned the language. But go to your local Walmart. You know what you're going to hear? They want to talk that way to themselves, that's fine. But you should not have to have multilingual cops or multilingual servers at restaurants or multilingual cashiers, be it at Walmart or anywhere, because people refuse to learn the language of the country that they come to for freedom, escaping the socialism and communism and the rights that have been taken away from them in their own country. Yet what do? They come to this country and they get pandered to by the Democrats, who are willing to do them a pleasure and tell them, hey, we'll give you WIC, welfare, SNAP, a free cell phone, free gasoline, free low-income housing, a HUD home. We'll put you up in apartments. We'll feed you. We'll even wipe your hind end if you want us to. All you got to do is vote for us. And again, guess what's going to happen when an influx of, let's say, 13 to 25 million of them come here? You know what that's going to represent? That's going to represent about 24 million new registered Democrats, which means that there will never be another Republican. Even though the Republicans of today, a lot of them need to be kicked out of office on their big overpaid fat behinds, along with the Democrats. But what it guarantees is that socialists will be elected. It guarantees that any agenda that the left wants to push will be pushed. And if Mr. President decides that he wants to stay in office for a third term, he will do so. Or a fourth term. Unless, of course, they allow Hillary to win because she's a woman, and we've had a black now in office, now we've got to have a woman. Do you really not see what is going on here, America? You know, I know that there are some black people listening to this, and if they are true Christians and true Americans, they will not be offended by this speech, because they know it to be the truth. I have stated in many a lecture, many a Bible study, that God loves all of His children equally. God is no respecter of person or of race. Now, the language that I'm using would be deemed by some who are waiting to be offended as racial. But to those who know the truth of our Father's Word, to those who want real freedom and real equality for their race, these words should not be offensive at all. They should be cheered for. As I said, every day there is some new insanity. Some new unbelievable, mind-blowing nonsense. But you won't hear it on the media, and if you do hear it in the media at all, you will catch it on Fox News, or you will hear it through people like a number of conservative talk show hosts, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, or various others, Dr. Ben Carson, or you will see it on websites such as American Family Action, or Godfather Politics, or Freedom Outpost, or the Reagan Coalition. But you won't see it in the mainstream media. You're not going to read it in newspapers. That is, unless you read the back page of section 10 of the newspaper in the bottom back corner in small writing in a column about the size of your four fingers. It's not headline worthy. You see, by putting it on the back of the paper, the media can say, we did report on it. We've got it right here. Look, here's a copy. We reported it. Yeah. But what did you put on the front page in bold writing with a picture? Was it Trayvon in a hoodie? Was it Jesse and Al protesting? You know, America, Christian brothers and sisters, God expects more of us than to just sit on our hands, and I know I've told you this a number of times. He expects us to at least stand up. I know we're going into global government. I know that the Antichrist must come. I know that there are certain events which cannot be gotten around. But we do not have to lay down like placid sheep and take this. And I don't know what it's going to take to get Americans roused up enough to where they will act. Because they just keep letting everyone and anyone run us over, whether it be Muslims or politically correct racial hypocrites or communist socialist agendites who were empowered by the Kenites. What's it going to take? I mean, I know can't be that many of you out there that are sound asleep to all of this. I know you see these things on blogs or on Fox News or on Glenn Beck and The Blaze, or you hear it from Rush Limbaugh, or Chuck Norris, or Ted Nugent, or any of 100 others, Sean Hannity. Yet for all the talking that gets done and all the words from John Boehner and all the other big-name Republicans, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Ron Paul, for all their words, nothing is being done. Not 1 inch has been taken back from socialism. Rather, it continues to take ground from the American Christian conservative capitalist. What's it going to take to get through to you, America? How much longer are you going to keep your head in the sand till we've got a hammer and sickle flying over our White House? If you think that's not possible, then go and listen to some of my previous lectures at what people did not think was possible in times past. Do you really think that all the German people knew what Adolf Hitler was going to bring that country to? Sure, for a few years he brought them into peace and prosperity. But then look what happened. Look what was left of Germany after Hitler. A demilitarized, destroyed nation with no infrastructure, divided up between Americans, Britons, and the communists of Russia. And now we have the EU, the European Union. And pretty soon the American Union, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. That's what NAFTA was about, and why they're building these super highways between the nations. The communist nations are already pretty much together. Russia may have a democratic veneer on, but communism still beats up under its skin, along with Communist China, Communist Asia and Asia Minor. They're setting this world up into blocks. Blocks to make a socialist nation and to take down the superpower of superpowers. Again, so that we're nothing more than a voice in the chorus instead of the world power. Is it any wonder that we are a laughingstock in the world? Our president is the most hated president of all time. Not because he has done good, but because people do recognize what he is and what he stands for, and who he is surrounded by. From the Department of Justice to his own cabinet, Muslims and communists and the Weather Underground and students of Saul Alinsky and other famous Marxist idealists. Again, what's it going to take, America? What's it going to take to get you to stand up for your Messiah, for your Savior, who hung upon a cross and let all of his life's blood bleed away so that you could have salvation? And for our Father who gave us the words that set men free, that caused this nation to rebel against itself so that men could be freed. What's it going to take, America? How much longer are you going to lie down like placid, grinning, little ignorant, honey-dripping Christian sheep and be walked over? Christians are like the little wimp on the block that's afraid of the big bad bully. And the big bad bully is big government under socialism. And no bully is ever defeated when you run and hide from him. The only thing that gets a bully's respect is for you to stand up to them. So when are you going to stand up, America? When are you going to stand up, Christianity? Christ men, representatives of the Most High God? At any rate, this is where I'm going to end this little rant. It was time once again for me to blow off a little bit of steam and to hopefully reach a few more of you that listen and wake you up to the reality of what's going on in our world. I don't care what color you are. I don't care where you came from. I don't care what your background has been. Stand up and be a champion for the Lord God Almighty. Vote these impudent wretches out of office. You know, if every Republican in office, except for the good ones, and every Democrat in office, except for the good ones, found themselves without a job next election or the next two elections, then America could have some prosperity before the time of the Antichrist and the tribulation comes along. The Bible states that we have to go into global government, but it does not say that we have to go in it as socialists or communists. Although that will be the method most likely of how it's done. But if it is, then Christians, And Americans will have no one to thank for themselves but themselves. At any rate, there you go. More current events in this world of blindness. May God bless you and keep you from that blindness, and keep you from the deception which is drawing down hard upon us. Thank you for listening. This has been Just Thoughts.